I'm Refaat Alareer. I am 35 years old. I was born and raised in Gaza in Palestine, Shujaiya. I'm currently continuing my PhD, almost halfway through. I teach at the Islamic University. I had my BA from the Islamic University in English language and literature, and I did my MA in comparative literature in London in 2007. And I currently teach world literature and creative writing, uh, basically poetry and like fiction writing and stuff like this. I'm I like to describe myself as an activist in the way that I like to work with people, with young people, with talents, uh, young journalists, young fiction writer, uh, those people. I finished editing a book last year on the caste-led attacks on Gaza in 2008 and 9, which we entitled Gaza Writes Back. The book is a collection of short stories written by some of my students here in Gaza in English. Again, to respond creatively to Israeli attacks and barbarity, and to show that we have in Palestine what enables us to lead normal human lives, decent lives with all the rights we should be having as human beings, and again to expose the atrocities of war, to show how horrible and ugly a war can be by giving names to victims, by telling their stories, by trying to break all the barriers of probably religion or race or identity sometimes, by giving a human story of those people Israel killed, the kids, the mothers, the young people, the old people. The book has been a success. It's been reviewed and received very positively almost everywhere, and it's been translated to a couple of languages, and hopefully more languages will come. The book shows that there is a lot to speak about here, especially in Gaza, that has so far been exposed to 3 wars in just 6 years or less. And it also shows that the crimes committed are really horrible, beyond description most of the time. And at the same time, it shows how Palestinians are desperately trying to extend their hands to the world, to communicate in English, in a language that they would understand, in order to put an end to this occupation. It's been like ages. We're born under occupation, we're raised under occupation. Everything we do, the occupation is hovering everywhere, above us, underneath us, behind us, in front of us. There's nothing, basically nothing we do in life, even marriage and death and birth, that is not smeared by occupation, that is not spoiled by occupation. So we're trying to, as young Palestinians, we're trying to find a more civilized way to put an end to this barbarity, this occupation that doesn't want to end, by very civilized, non-violent ways. When I did my MA in comparative literature at UCL, and I examined how Palestinian and Israeli poets represent and approach Jerusalem, and in so many poems the similarities were striking. Like, you're reading the poem and you think the writer is Palestinian and he ends up being an Israeli, and vice versa. So the love of the city, in a way or another, was there. I took that when I came back here. In one of my classes, I was teaching something about the death of the author, that we shouldn't be too much asking questions about who the writer is and the identity of the writer, and it's the text that matters. a kind of a formalist approach. And I brought them the text by an Israeli poet, Yehuda Amichai, and I took off the name, distributed the poem, and I asked them to comment. Now, half of the students had the name of the poet, Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai, and the other half didn't know who the poet was. And that was very interesting because usually people who knew they were doing an Israeli poet were not appreciative of the poem itself. In a way or another, they were like more into how this guy does not depict the depth and the beauty of Jerusalem the way a Palestinian poet usually does, especially at the time when Tamim al-Barghouti was writing poetry about Jerusalem. And the guys who didn't have the name of the poet, again, started appreciating how beautiful Jerusalem is being depicted here, and how the poet is capturing the depth and the beauty and what Jerusalem means to us as Palestinians, and what Israel is doing, building walls and this kind of thing. And then I told them the poet is not Palestinian, the poet is an Israeli poet. But with those people who knew the name, because they have this kind of prejudice against the occupation and everything that relates to them, they kind of did not appreciate the poem the way it should be appreciated, did not like the poem, some of them. On the other hand, the people who didn't know the poet, some of them even attributed it to Mahmoud Darwish or Samih al-Qasri. And the lesson was that, and that was like the general idea about we shouldn't care about who the writer is as much as we care and love and appreciate the poem. But then I was also sending messages of these similarities. We're all human beings after all, and we share all these feelings towards the place we love, we want to be in, we want to belong to, and at the same time sending messages about the fact that there is, because even in English, when you tell people I teach English poetry, they say, really? They write poetry in English? Say, yeah, they do. And the same thing applies to Hebrew. Really? They have literature in Hebrew? And I say, yeah, of course. And it's as much, like as beautiful as the poetry we have in Arabic and in English. It's like a whole culture and everything and heritage. So even some of the students started looking for more poems by the same poet or other Israeli poets. And I was happy how they reacted to this. Like, they kind of broke a taboo that we shouldn't be studying. If nobody ever said that we shouldn't be studying this, but because nobody was doing it, was a kind of a taboo. When I broke that, and I started bringing more texts. At the same time happened when I started teaching the Merchant of Venice, when again the students would react to Shylock because he's Shylock, because he's a Jew. They would treat him the way the Bassanio and the other characters in the play would be treating him, like look down upon him, describe him as the root cause of evil, as the source of evil, and other things. And again, we started asking questions. What would you do if you were in his position? What would you do if you were isolated, alienated? Like exactly what's happening now to us Palestinians in Gaza, or Palestinians in Jerusalem or the West Bank, or even Palestinians of the 1984, where they're treated as second-class citizens, no full rights, and sometimes no basic human rights. How would you react? A question that usually goes under something called moral realism, like you have to disregard all differences and start asking questions about what you would be doing if you were in the same place. And then the discussion kind of moved from the always ready answer of Shylock is to blame, Shylock is horrible, he was bloodthirsty, he wanted a pound of flesh, he wanted to kill the guy, to ask questions about a whole society that would push somebody into reacting in this horrible way, this cannibalistic
way. No sane person would be doing this unless he is pushed to the extreme, unless he is pushed, isolated, branded terrorist or whatever. And when usually I experience this with different groups, and when I taught Oliver Twist, there was also Fagin there, and Fagin to some extent was we identified more with Fagin because he was in so many ways, because at the end he was caught and he was sent to prison. It was horrible, and Fagin for some of the students was at the beginning was the source of evil because he was corrupting the future of the society, bringing kids, teaching them to be thieves, and like forming gangs and stuff. When they usually think of Fagin as a Jew, and then everything comes later on, they're going to be heading towards blaming him. He's to blame because he's corrupting the source of the future of the society, the kids. I remember comparing between Fagin and the church, what the church did to the kids. No food, no shelter, no treatment, no fun, nothing. At the same time, Fagin was giving them hope, was giving them shelter, was teaching them. It's true, he wasn't teaching them moral things, but he was teaching them, giving them a reason for life, to be happy, to be hopeful. And for the first time, we see the little kids laughing, sleeping peacefully, enjoying whatever they were doing. For some of the students, Fagin, as far as I can remember, the question was like, can you talk about Fagin as a Palestinian? And some of the students saw the similarities because he was isolated, because he was branded, because he was, even the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he looks like, his crooked back, his long nose, his hat, his ragged coat and stuff, told us that, like even the writer himself told us that this is somebody who's different and has to be treated differently. So when you take a step back, like, in order to avoid being framed, because if you read Fagin in Oliver Twist, you're going to hate you're going to hate Fagin because of the way he's presented to us. If you take that as a matter of fact, you're going to hate Fagin. But if you take a step back to question what the writer was doing, to question the process of framing that we Palestinians are exposed to here in Israel and in Western media, that we branded as this and that, we described as this and that. We usually see frequent pictures of the Middle East of people, angry people shouting and celebrating death or whatever. And of course, with the issue of Semitism was always brought up. And while I believe Semitism is there, and I believe and I once tweeted about this, there's anti-everything. There's anti-Semitism, anti-Palestine, anti-Arabs, anti-Islam, anti-America, anti-capitalism, anti-socialism. There's basically anti-everything. If anti-Semitism means that Israel continues, for example, doing whatever it does without being questioned, that's not anti-Semitism. That's, if like Israel is doing stuff, no, don't talk to Israel, and that's anti-Semitism. That's wrong. Even some Israelis started questioning this. I have to stand against Israel when Israel is committing crimes. I have to say no to Israel. I have to criticize Israel.
If I am branded as anti-Semitic or self-hating Jew, that's wrong, because you're giving Israel absolute power, and you're not constructively trying to put an end to whatever crimes is being committed by Israel. So, and we tended to discuss, like, I didn't usually, for example, like to accuse Shakespeare of being anti-Semitic. We presented it as either Shakespeare was anti-Semitic because he was living in a society that was anti-Semitic, or Shakespeare was exposing his own community that was anti-Semitic. And the same applies to Charles Dickens. Because this was, and I have a couple of my colleagues at the department that are working with the same stream, like trying to help students overcome the prejudice they have because they live under occupation, and just to appreciate literature as literature. But we usually came to, for example, every time there's an escalation, every time there's an attack, I honestly wasn't as strongly promoting these ideas as I should be, because sometimes I sounded silly when Israel is killing us and without being stopped or questioned or tried for crimes. If you preach that no, there are these similarities and we can coexist, it's exactly it's happening now. It's not easy. I think it's different. I was asked a couple of months ago when I first came here if the students are reacting differently. I think they are reacting differently to the same things I discussed long before. The issues of whether we can coexist. And yesterday I also was tweeting about this, that Israel was and is and still trying to cause death and damage to almost everybody, so that when it comes to coexisting, nobody wants to coexist. I don't want to forgive. I don't want to forget. I don't want to forgive because Israel destroyed my house, killed my brother, killed my cousins, my relatives, and is still causing me all this kind of damage, and then I don't want to coexist, which is something Israel doesn't want to. They want as many Palestinians as possible to say no to coexistence, because Israel is benefiting, because it's more powerful now. But for me, as a Palestinian, as an academic, a person who traveled, who met people who have a person who has friends, Jewish friends from all races and religions, and I say this and I repeat this, and I'm planning to write about this. I'm willing, as a Palestinian, as a person, to compromise when justice is done, when people who committed crimes are brought to justice, when occupation is no more. 100% I'm willing to forgive. But again, at the same time, preaching this has become very difficult. Like I've spoken to people who haven't been directly touched or harmed by the war, but they're very angry and very frustrated. That even some of my students, because in the short story class I have now, I ask them to write, and I see this in their writing. They're angrier now than they were during the war, because that was war, and okay, we can understand a country that is waging war and committing all these crimes, but now it's no longer, and the siege should be lifted. We should live our own lives. They started seeing what Israel is doing. Israel doesn't want us to live a peaceful life, a life of peace and quiet. They want to remind us every moment that we're inferior, and we should be living under the occupation, under their mercy for the rest of our lives.
Very good. Very good.
And in my poetry class, I still haven't taught that poem by Yehuda Amichai, and I'm planning to ask my students to write a kind of reflection
and try to, as much as I can, to compare between previous answers and answers that would be given to by my students now to Yehuda Amichai's poem about Jerusalem. Writing is a way of healing, a way of finding answers, and most importantly, a way to kind of like erase all the anger you have, or like release the anger you have. I've done this before. I've seen how very important expressing yourself in writing, where you reach to people and see how people empathize and sympathize with you and stand with you, and how you change the world by educating the world and educating yourself. If we're doing this in writing, and then the young people start feeling that they can positively contribute to this, then they're not going to be thinking of other non-constructive ways of putting an end to the current situation. But sadly, it's like I've always wanted this to be like in a bigger kind of a circle, or under an umbrella of a society or a center that would take care of all these young promising writers, and then we can hit more than one bird in the same stone. We educate them, we teach them, we give them skills, writing skills, and we record history, because this is history in making, and we reach out for others, and then we release most of the anger they have. I'm currently working with Pam Bailey on a project that could be a first step to putting establishing a website and inviting young people to write stories about themselves, their family members, or people they know.
I believe Hamas is losing popularity, of course, and that's in 2012. I wasn't also here in Gaza. I was told that Hamas, like everybody supported Hamas because they were very well organized, reacting to Israeli aggression when they assassinated al-Jabari. But soon after, they started losing this popularity, mainly because they are in the government, and people don't want to. I think people usually don't like people in governments because they are the policeman that tells you, that gives you a ticket or whatever, or because of some like bad management stuff, which is everywhere in Gaza. But this time, I think it's different because the popularity, like most people started supporting the military wing of Hamas. So this time they're saying, okay, there's Hamas and there's the armed wing of Hamas, Hezbollah Qassam, and we're 100% supporting those young people who really were like did everything they can. They surprised us in the way they stood in Shijaiya and Khuzaa and elsewhere in Gaza, how they managed to stand against Israel's brutality and to score so many things against Israel. Especially the other day, a guy who's not Hamas he made a point that I really loved. He said, you know what, in Shijaiya alone, the Hamas fighters who died in face-to-face clashes are a lot less than the Israeli soldiers who were killed by those young people in face-to-face clashes. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Imagine if they're not in government. Well, like they were distracted governing Gaza, and they managed to do this. I love that this came from a non-Hamas person, a person who wouldn't usually praise Hamas, but his own praise of al-Qassam fighters. So I think even now, because the deconstruction is delayed, which is something Israel is doing on purpose, Hamas is losing some of its popularity. But if you come to ask people about if they support the armed resistance, or at least if they still trust them, I think they would be saying yes. Like
because even if you thought that there's bad management of Gaza Strip everywhere, because Hamas is not running Gaza that like it should be run. But those people, those young people, who worked very hard to dig the tunnels to build whatever they managed to do it, to build, how they managed to surprise us, to surprise Israel, and how they managed to keep very secretive about what they were doing, the tunnels, and how they went inside occupied Palestine. So we're still all, I'm talking about myself, I'm all respect and all praise of them, and I think they deserve this. And I think if they're given the chance, those same people to be in other areas of Gaza Strip, to contribute positively to building a good society, they would be able to do it. Because I don't think they're only good military guys and then they're bad people in their offices. I think if they're given the chance. What happened is that they were given the chance and the money to dig, to buy whatever they needed, tools they needed to dig tunnels and to train very well. So if they have the same opportunity to do different things in Gaza, I think they will be successful. But again, coming to popularity, it's not the same as it was during the war. I'm an non-violent person. I describe myself as I always support medias and writing as a process, as a way of resistance. But during the war, I was 100% supporting those fighters because it's the least I can do. It's the least I can do. I am Palestinian. I am under fire. My house was destroyed. Several people I know and I don't know, 100,000 people were killed and injured. The least I can do is to support the fighters. And then when things like clear out, if I have something to say, advice or criticism, I can do it in the way I can, in the way possible to me. In 2008 and 9, I was here in Gaza. I was at home. It was winter, and I always say this, we were under 2 or 3 blankets, and we were like shaking of cold and fear. Imagine those people out there. That's why they win our respect. They're people who understood what they're doing. They understood that they're fighting for their rights. And as a Palestinian, the least I can do is to understand that they're doing this for nothing else. And some of them, they're not all young and unmarried. Some of them are married with kids and family members. And there's this Tamim Barghouti, famous Palestinian poet. He's Egyptian, half Egyptian, half Palestinian. In one of his very famous poems about Gaza, he said something like, the fighters haven't been killed, and those who were in their houses were killed. So it's a lesson that, like, you should be fighting, because it's the least dangerous place is when you are at the front. It's like, so be there. This is where you should be belonging. And I as a Palestinian, when we talk even with friends, we know that if Israel wanted to get inside Gaza, it wasn't difficult. But again, they would destroy more houses, kill more people. But from what we saw from the 5 Palestinian fighters, we believe it could have been also, like, they could have paid a heavier price than that. And we know there are a lot more casualties from the Israeli side, the soldiers in particular, that Israel didn't reveal for a reason or another. So that's why, personally, I respect those people. And for now, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want a solution where we have to fight and kill and get killed. I don't want that. But if we are it's like we are soldiers in a battle that we don't want to be in. We are put in a corner where you have to either die doing nothing or die doing the least you can do. It's like the last act of defiance. It's like, if you don't do this, you're going to be disgraced. Like, because that's life and it's humanity, and there will be people in 100 years or 200 years who would be saying, oh, the Palestinians didn't fight the occupation, oh, the Palestinians fought the occupation. And it's exactly like when we now speak about the French resistance, or the resistance in Vietnam, or the resistance everywhere. It's like everybody speaks highly of those people. It's not only because of that, but that's what should we do. I was asked by somebody, non-Palestinian, he asked me to recommend something to watch to know Palestine, and I recommended 5 Broken Cameras. And he said, what is it about? He said, it shows how non-violent people in Palestine are also crushed and killed by Israel. So you don't have to be carrying a gun, and just watch that and see what Israel is doing. So if you do simple math, it's like, if you do this, you did. If you do this, you did. If you do this, you also did. So you try to pick a way to inflict like loss on the heavily armed occupier. But again, do I want to see it happen again? Of course no. Do I think it's fighting is the way out? I think no. But if it's the only option, I always ask myself, what if I were in Gaza, if I had been in Gaza, what would have I done? It's not because I know people who, until the war, they were not part of the resistance, but they joined. And I was like, I tried to write a story about some of those people, or one of those people, and I didn't manage to put my hand on any of them, but I think if I keep asking around, I can find somebody who decided to become a fighter in this short period. Because people, and if you ask anybody, say like, I always thought I would be dead any minute. So, and that's the stupidest thing Israel does. Israel is making everybody wants to be a fighter. Saying like, because if you are at home, you're dead. If you are in the street, you're dead. If you are, even like the stories that came out from Shuja'iyya, people who were targeted in their house. They went out, they were targeted in the streets. They were in the ambulance. They were targeted in the ambulance. It's the same, like, there was no... I was like, when my kids tell the stories, and like my friends, one of my friends, he said, he's one of my best friends. So my wife and kids went to stay at their place that horrible day. They called it Black Sunday. So they stayed, and then they decided, oh, we should be leaving here. It's not even safe. They were like in the middle of Shuja'iyya. And one of his kids said, Dad, let's take the car. And he said, I thought, no, a car, one shell, a car, we're all dead. So I said, let's walk. And then we walked, and some shells were like flying here and there, and they were all injured with the debris. And he said, my kid looked at me and said, Dad, I told you we should have taken the car. He's like 5 years old. And he said, I started crying. I said, Dad, this is all I can think of now. I thought this is safe. But, and so, and he was very emotional. Because these are kids, they don't understand stuff. But again, clearly it was safer for the kid to run because it's very fast. But he said no. And it took them because they were like, after the war, like 2 or 3 weeks after the war, they started, taking out the debris from their bodies. He said, I don't want to go to the hospital because there are people with more urgent cases. This guy is wonderful and amazing. He's also good at putting things into words. there was also, if you're familiar with Sarah Ali, also she has a story in Gaza Rights Back. She posted something again wonderful about a guy who always came to fix that, whatever, the tubes, the water, he was a plumber. And she said again, I was shocked when I realized that he was one of the fighters. She would never. And then she wrote something in praise of the fighter, because they don't usually take as much, because as Palestinians we usually tend to avoid talking about those people as fighters, but we have to. Because yes, they're human beings, they have lives and wives and kids and hopes and dreams and everything, but at the same time they were fighters, and we have to respect their choice. We have to speak about that. We have to show that those people they don't get paid to be that. It's a choice that was one of the very limited choices that they have to make. Being from Shujaia is something to be proud of, and it's become like something even clearer after the war, because now everybody is like, wow, what the guys did in Shujaia was very heroic, something that everybody has to be proud of. Oh, it's like, oh, from Shujaia, wow. And it's more common than ever before. Although when we usually in friendly setting, we make fun of everything, everybody. So there are people who crack jokes about Shujaia, and Shujaia we crack jokes about others. It's like, even from Shujaia, there are people who there's Turkmen, and there's Jdeida, people who live here and there. Again, the funny kind of social division that exists everywhere, like in New York, even when you make fun, for example, about people in Queens or Staten Island or New Jersey or being outside. But I think it's not usually, I'm not sure if this is genuine of most of what we do when we crack jokes about other people's origins. I think it's, in a way, it's history. I mean that, like when you crack a joke about people coming from Yibna, for example, or coming from Asqalan or Majdan or Ashkelon, whatever. Part of it, and part of it is like history, like I came from that place. I belong there, my parents belong there, and it's a place that I'm proud of. And then there's a question, are you planning to go back to Shujaia? Of course I want to go back to Shujaia. I usually wanted, just when I finished my PhD, to buy a flat somewhere in the city near where I work, close to every place I go to here. But now that I'm outside Shujaia, because I couldn't find a place to rent in Shujaia, I think I will never leave Shujaia. It's where I grew up, where I belong, where my kids are grew up, and they're constantly asking me to take us to our house. In the beginning it was because some of them still didn't see the house, the destroyed house. I was like, I don't want them to see the house destroyed, but they kept insisting, and I had to take them like twice. It wasn't easy for them. Seeing the house you were born in and raised, and you had all the fun in the world, and you had to change everything, change friends, change schools, change the way you go to school, the way you... Shujaia, when you live there, it's like the whole neighborhood. And I always say this. Probably for the past 10 years, we never locked our main door. We don't, because it's like your cousins live here, your relatives here and there, and it's like, it's always very safe. It's everybody knows everybody. Like living in the city, it's like, again, it's a very small city, but it's like you're in a totally different area, totally different place where you don't know your neighbors, you don't know the shopkeeper, you don't know the barber, you have to change barbers, and that's a horrible thing. Seriously, somebody made fun of me because I said I'm sad that I have to change my barber because the other one knows exactly what I want. So I just go and just close my eyes and I wake up all fresh and new. But now you have to. And these are things we don't usually talk about because there's things that are a lot more important. But I think that we have to talk about them because we're human beings. It's not about making fuss about simple things. We have to fight for everything. And if I forsake my right to choose my own barber, for example, then I might be expected to just ignore other rights.
Can you talk about what happened to your family and your home?
I honestly didn't ask for the details because I didn't want my, for example, mom or dad to remember losing Muhammad, one of my brothers. When I got the news when I was in Malaysia, and I got the news 2 days before my family. And that was crazy. Somebody contacted me also by Twitter, told me, okay, there's bad news. Should I tell it to you? I said, okay, go on. He said, your brother Muhammad was killed. I said, are you sure? Are you certain? He said, yes. I said, where was he? He was at home, and then they bombed my uncle's house, and then the whole block was destroyed, and he was there inside. And I said, do my parents know? He said, I'm not sure. I said, what? How can you tell me without, how do you expect me just to call them from outside and tell them that? And then I said, are you certain? He said, it's like 95% certain that. I said, if you're 95% about somebody's death, then don't tell anybody because you have to be, it's not. And then I called back home and there was, hey mom, hey, what's going on? How's everybody? We're fine, we're cool. And I knew that they haven't had the news yet. So and I started naming, I have a big family, naming all my brothers, every single one of them. And I said, how is Muhammad? And she said, okay, last time he contacted us 5 days ago. He was at home and he texted us that he was fine. And then like 2 days later, there was a truce and they went to the house and they found him in the inside dead with one like because he chose to stay behind. And I was like, if I'd been in Gaza, I would have chosen to stay back. It could have been me in so many ways. I'm not sure how people see this, and because there's been a lot of talk about leaving your houses or not leaving your houses. When people started saying that Israel is calling everybody to leave, I called my wife and said, do you want to leave? She said, where should we go? Because usually if you're from Shujaiya, then most of your relatives are from Shujaiya. So if you want to leave, you usually leave to a place in Shujaiya, like what happened, and that's what happened with my family. They moved to like 10 blocks away, and then 10 more blocks away, and then 10 more blocks away, but they still remained in Shujaiya and it wasn't safe. So that was a major concern. It's like pushing somebody to jump off a cliff. So most of the people decided not to leave because Israel was saying that Hamas did not told people not to leave, and they did. They told people don't leave, but I am not aware of any. Although one of my friends probably said that some people said that they were made to stay, but that wasn't the case. Like that wasn't the norm. And I told him if I wanted to leave, nobody can make me stay. So it's not about somebody making me stay or somebody making me leave. And then it was that night, the horrible night came. And as I started chilling randomly, non-stop, much what you were hearing in Gaza, then was following the news, and it was like they were being punished for not obeying IDF's orders, not leaving their houses. But what everybody says is that around 6 o'clock, sometime around 6 o'clock, there was a lull, a little calm, like for 30 minutes, and then let's go. And while most of the people were flooding the streets, leaving, the shelling started again. And that's why most of the people who were killed in Shijaya, they were killed in the streets. And you've seen the videos. So it's like, okay, I'm giving you 30 minutes. I'm giving you some calm so that you would decide that it's time to leave. And then when the people left, they were targeted. Most of the people were killed in the streets. Most of them. So it's like, if you stay, we're targeting you. If you don't. So they seemingly lost contact with my brother, and he was, they went back and they took his body and they buried him. It was horrible because there was no place to. When they came back, because at the beginning, one of my uncle's houses was targeted. People who remained, very old men who remained also in his place, and they probably were tracking mobile signals, and if they felt that there is a mobile signal in the house, they were targeted. And the people who remained there, they said that our uncle's house was targeted with a barrel of explosives, because if you go there, there's no house there. It's like there's no debris. It kind of evaporated. And there was a missile, a F-16 missile that hit the stairs, and then our house fell to one of its sides. And when they came back after like 5 or 10 days later, one of the houses next to us was targeted, and then our house fell down. And it remained like leaning on 2 other houses. It was very dangerous. They had to destroy everything last week. And that's his last moments, like my people who were like, because my brother was so quiet. I wrote about him, was so cool, so like always thinking, like a man of few words. And like almost like 10 years later, like before, I was like, oh my God, is this my brother Hamad? Because I named him. I'm not sure, I was 5 or 4, but I remember very clearly when he was born. And his name officially is Muhammad in certificate, but I insisted on calling him Hamad, and he became Hamad. So his last moment, he was like helping my family and everybody else, like, don't worry, nobody is going to be harmed, just go. And then he apparently decided to go back at a time when everybody was leaving, and so many people remained. And most of the people who were killed in Shijaya, they were killed when they were inside their houses. I'm not sure again how it happened, but everybody's saying that Israel clearly was tracking the mobile phone signals. So if they feel there is a mobile phone signal, despite the fact that fighters don't usually, they use other means of communication to. And now you have to name it. It's like usually you think that these things never happen to you. Like when people who lose a family member, who have orphans at home. We've seen this. It's very common in Gaza, but it's like you go on in life and now it doesn't happen to us. And now you have 2 little kids. And one of them is my 3 years and a half and like a year and a half. Ranim. She wants, because she's now staying with her mom at their grandpa's there. So she came to our house to where my parents are renting, and she saw her dad's picture, and she was, Dad, I don't like you. You haven't come back. Something like that was like made everybody cry at home. I hate you, Dad, because you didn't come back. She doesn't know. And we have had this, I don't know how tough it's going to be. The fact that there was so many people dying made it, a little bit easier on my parents. One of my uncles was killed by Israeli prison guards in 1973. His wife was pregnant, and he was killed, tortured to death. And my grandparents, especially my grandmother, she cried for like 30 years every time he's mentioned him. And now his son, he's an amazing guy. He's married with like 6 or 7 kids. So we've had this in the family, but it wasn't easy. Like when we were, he's probably, I'm not sure how much older, but he's like 7, 8 years older than me. But we felt that when we were kids, going on life with the father, with what a father stands for, the protection, the giving thing, and seeing your cousin without a father was, even on us, was very, very harsh.
When Max and I were in Shujaiya, I came upon, I don't know what family member was, but your family's home. Mm-hmm. And I took a photo and tweeted it, and I remember you responded, "That's my family."
Yeah.
Was that some news that you weren't aware of, that about what one of your family members told me?
When they attacked Shujaiya, when they bombarded Shujaiya, people didn't go back until like I think 5 days later, I guess, and they managed to retrieve the bodies. So I heard that there were people from my extended family stuck somewhere, and nobody told me who they were. So you just had to spend like 3 or 4 days knowing that some family members were killed, but you don't know who they were. You don't know. So just thinking of it, it's like the guy who told me there is a 95% chance that your brother died. Are you sure? Yes. Are you sure that this, because there was no electricity, there was no, and even until this moment, when I talk to my friends, I realized that I knew a lot more than they did, because I was outside, electricity all the time, internet. And then I realized that there were 3 brothers. The house he went to, 3 brothers and a son, one of the sons was, and those are the most, like, they wouldn't hurt a fly, seriously. It's like, and this is something even the family members and others would see. Like, those are people who stayed at their homes. The only fault was that probably they had a phone signal that told the Israeli, whatever, that there are people inside, and then they were hit directly. It's like when somebody dies in their own home, the safest place on earth, the place you run to, seeking refuge. But because the whole area they were in was raised, so even if they didn't have a phone signal, probably the house could have been. And I'm not sure, still, I saw pictures of their bodies later on, but I'm not sure how they died, whether they were, because there were some people in that house, the big house that was exactly behind, that area. There was the tall white building, and there was a big house that was destroyed from the middle, like this, like 4-story, and then there was the house of my relatives. There are people inside that house that were executed. I'm not sure if you met the old man. He's a relative of Salim Shamali. The guy was inside, and then the Israeli troops invaded the area, and he just opened the door and he left. He's like, I'm not sure how old, like 70 something. And they shot him, I'm not sure, once or twice, and he pretended that he was dead. Like from a very close range for a long time, and then he had to crawl. He like 3 days later, again with the smoke, with the crawling, with the blood. I'm not sure how about the distance, but all of a sudden he appeared to one of, again, the places people we know, and the guy who first saw him, he thought that this is a ghost. Like, imagine somebody bleeding for 3 days, crawling for 3 days with all the dust and the smoke. But then again, it's a message that Israel wants everybody to get. But you don't have to be a fighter. You don't have to be armed. Just being there. And that reminds me of in 2008 and 9. Shijai was one of the calmest places in Gaza, and there was a small incursion in the last week of the cast lead. And we didn't have water then, so we went upstairs on the roof of our house to with my dad and two of my brothers to fill the water tanks with the truck and everything. And we were just minding our business. We're like far away from the borders, from where the incursion was taking place, and we were like filling the tanks with water. It was clear. I'm not sure how good the resolution of the drone is, or the whatever they have. You can clearly see that we were filling the tanks, and we were like, and like some sniper took a shot at me. It was like probably this far, and I was mesmerized. I took shelter and was like, oh my God. And then we very quickly went down and didn't complete filling the tanks, and that was so. I lived in the first Intifada. I threw stones and I got injured like 3 times by rubber coated bullets, but I never came this close to live munitions, to live bullets. It was so horrible, and it was like for a long time. Oh my God, I wasn't doing anything. Like literally I was trying to live. I was trying to bring water to the family. But then again, you try to be sane and ask these questions, and then, oh, that's the Israeli occupation. Nothing makes sense. Why should this make sense? But it's like if you don't want to be a fighter, we're killing you anyway. And isn't that horrible? Isn't that's a crime? I don't want to be a fighter. I don't want to use like a personal belief. I don't want this to be my way of life. I'm an academic, an activist. I teach, I educate, I learn, I travel, I meet people. And the same thing, by the way, like it's a little bit different, but when I was in the States and I met all those wonderful people, and I met people from Jewish Voice for Peace and other wonderful Jewish people who are even non-activists. It was so friendly, so generous, so wonderful. I was like, oh my God, I'm 30. I'm 35, and I have never met a Jewish person who's not armed, who's not shooting at me or preventing me from traveling, or and then I was like, but that's the walls Israel has been building, and probably we were, of course, contributing to, but that's what Israel wants. Israel wants to isolate us, like physically in the West Bank. They don't want Palestinians and Israelis to meet and to talk. So building all kinds of walls, the separation wall, psychological walls, that even in one of my And you never come to the realization of until you meet people and you talk to them, no matter how open-minded you are. I have always believed that we don't have a problem with Jews, we don't have a problem with Judaism, it's the occupation, it's Zionism. But when you never ever meet Jews, for example, it's going to be a lot different. When you meet people and you talk to them, I've wonderful people. What, for example, Jewish Voice for Peace is doing is wonderful. And it shows that we don't have a problem with Jews, it's not Judaism. Judaism is hijacked. Israel is doing all these things. And I was like, I'm blaming myself in part, but again, that's something, the occupation, because in 2005, I had a scholarship. I went to Rafah, Israel was still there, and they sent me back. They asked me all sort of questions about people I know, people I don't know, and then they sent me back. They didn't allow me to travel to do my MA in 2005. When Israel left in 2006, I managed to do it. In 2010, I got the Fulbright scholarship, and Israel didn't allow me to go get my American visa. And I lost an amazing chance of doing a PhD in America with everything that brings, the open-mindedness, the education, the chance to meet people from all walks of life, because Israel doesn't want this. So it's like this kind of this war Israel is waging. It's not only military war, it's in politics, economics, and most importantly, it's a psychological and an intellectual war. A war against books, a war against academics, a war against education, a war against everything. It's whatever they call it, it's crazy. Most of what Israel is doing just to assert their occupation, to oppress Palestinians, and not give them their human rights. It's like if this effort that has been put in the occupation has been put somewhere else, probably we could be living on Mars now. Seriously, it's like the money, the efforts, the thinking, the thousands of hours of planning, of strategic planning, of building walls, of tracing the sky, collecting information, collecting intelligence here and there. Imagine if this has been invested in peacemaking. Because it's like they don't want anybody to criticize them. That's a totalitarian society. That's 1948, 84, George Orwell. It's with the intelligence and the bugs and the spying and it's a democracy, but you can speak. There's freedom of speech, as long as you're a Jew, as long as you say certain things. I wrote an article about my experience about storytelling, and I started this with a question that I have never ever expected. My eldest kid, Shaima, was 5 during Castlet. And then out of nowhere she came and said, "Dad, who created the Jews?" Literally, like this, 5-year-old. And at home, I'm very careful. I don't have posters. Even now, my dead brother, I don't have posters of him. I don't want my kids just to grow up seeing posters of. I have a way of bringing up my kids, even with the conflict. I'm very careful about what I say and what I don't say and what. And that question came to me, and of course, I couldn't answer the question. What can I say to a 5-year-old? But the thing is that what made this 5-year-old answer this question? It's if you can't see the answer to that. If Israel doesn't see the answer to that, that's horrible. She grows up. Every couple of months there was an attack, there was somebody dying here, and then the war came, and she must have realized that because kids are always told that God is loving, God always comes to the rescue of the good people and everything, God loves all and all these things. So she must have realized that there must be another horrible, ruthless God that created those horrible people bombarding us. So I wrote this, and the editor was commented on the word Jew, and I said, oh yeah, okay, I know this. In Palestine, when we say Jew, it doesn't mean Jew. We always refer to the armed guy that is shooting at us, or the guy in the F-16 or controlling the drone. It's an easy word, a small word. We don't have to say nobody, like the kids are not politicians would say the Zionist occupation or the Israeli armed soldier or something. So she wanted me to be clear about this. Okay, I can clarify, but I don't want to change the word because this is part of what I'm showing. But this is what the kids knows. This is a kid that I honestly try to keep far away from the pull and push of the Intifada and the occupation and everything. But this is a kid who also sees the news, hears the news, and talks to other kids at home, downstairs, at the nursery, wherever she goes. I know the same. My three of my kids went through 3 wars, and imagine now what they think. Despite that, I would never teach them to hate, because no matter who you make them hate, it's going to backfire. It's going to backfire because it's exactly what happened, for example, in usually the post-war trauma, when soldiers go back home and they still live the mentality of the soldiers, and they want to control and they want to fight. And they want to be soldiers everywhere, to lead the life of a soldier.
I mean, what is your sense of how young people feel about their futures? Do they all want to leave? Does some want to leave?
It's natural that some of them are frustrated, because it's becoming frustrating. And I hear more people than ever before who want just to seek future somewhere else. And they have every right to do so. It's not easy. Life is not like it used to be 20 years ago, when you just go to the UK and you just seek asylum. It's horrible. And they have seen what happened to the Palestinians in the ship 3 months ago. But there are people more than ever before believing that there's no future, there's no scope, we should leave. But again, there are more people than ever before who insist on staying, on remaining, on that. We know what Israel wants us to do, to leave. We don't want to leave. Even living here is part of our right to exist and to resist. And I'm one of those people. I would never imagine myself under any circumstances living outside Gaza. This is my life, this is where I belong, this is my country. I want my kids to live here, to be brought up here, to live in Palestine, like my parents, my grandparents, and the great-grandparents, and etc. But of course, if there are chances, like, doesn't mean I'm against traveling outside for education, for courses, for entertainment, for pleasure. Traveling itself is a bliss, is a blessing that I encourage everybody to travel. People who ask, should I do MA outside or inside? Of course, do it outside, because you have to meet people and become more open-minded, see the world differently, read the world differently, approach the world differently. But I'm against those people who want just to live forever. And I think they usually come back. It's not easy for anybody to leave his own country. And as Palestinians, we're very much attached, and I speak for myself and for most of the people I know, very much attached to our country. Not because it's not political, because we have to be here, it's an act of resistance. It's in part, it's that, but because this is where we belong. So many young people, unemployed people, and there's so many old people taking control of every aspect of life. And those people failed in so many ways. They failed miserably. And I think it's time to give more time, more space, more chance for the young people to lead in so many ways. We've seen how, for example, the young people led the battle against to defend Palestine, defend Gaza 4 months ago, whether in the battle, whether in hospitals, voluntary work, whether on social media. All the young people were doing the majority of the work. And because those young people do not have real chances to be effective, to be constructive, they have every right to feel frustrated. And it's the older generation contributing to this, the aging Palestinian leadership. And there are so many stories that criticize, for example, class division in Gaza Strip. It's true that there are references in a way or another to the fact that the occupation caused this, the refugees and the citizens. But there are always criticism to the aging Palestinian leadership, like critical views here, criticizing how they do things, how they approach things, and the fact that they want to dominate and to control and not to leave any chance to the young people to express themselves. So it's there even when they write, even when they express themselves in fiction. If we solve this, I think in part some of the people who want to leave will say, okay, I can't find myself in my own country. I can't positively contribute to that. So unemployment. Before 2006, it was mainly Fatah guys that were employed, and now it's mainly Hamas guys who are employed, although they don't get salaries nowadays. And there's so many people who are neither Fatah nor Hamas who couldn't get a job. So you have to be very smart, very good. There's so many people graduating from our universities. You can start your own business, which is not it's not usually likely to succeed, because anytime Israel can just siege the whole thing and not allow raw materials, and then you're doomed. And those people, I think they're growing in number. They're not happy with Hamas, they're not happy with Fatah. Those young people can be, if there's some smart guy or guys who can really work well, plan well, I'm not sure they probably can go for a political party for the young people under, I'm not sure, 35, 40, where they can take the initiative, be there, represent themselves, truly represent themselves, and not allow others to represent themselves, because the old people, it's true that all Palestinians will have all the same suffering, but the young are absent. It's very clear. If they're absent, then nobody cares about them, or they care very little about them. That's why.
They're politically absent, you mean?
Politically, even when it comes to decision making, especially in politics, even in socially also, the role the young should be playing in constructing a better life, better society. When it comes to everything, every aspect of life, if the young males are marginalized, then the young females are marginalized twice. So they're very underrepresented here and there. We've been living here, and we know what it means to go through, to travel, to cross the borders, to leave Gaza to Egypt, to anywhere in the world. There's so many questions and so many whys and hows and whats. But once you just, for a moment, get rid of this feeling of being occupied, you really enjoy like being a guy who's not occupied, with whatever that means, the feeling, the pleasure, the joy of just owning your own life, making your own decisions, planning your what to do and what not to do and how and where and
What's the identity? Stop development identity.
it's horrible being under occupation.